Welcome back, everybody, to the read-along book club of Jeff Vandermeer's The Southern Reach Trilogy. We're still in acceptance. This is episode 15. We've been really going a while here, haven't we? And unfortunately, I didn't record this video in pieces, so I'm going to have to do this entire marathon. Bear with me. Hopefully, I don't lose steam. But what are you thinking about these last few chapters? So a lot goes down. We can tell we're getting to the climax of the story. We have the full-on... The final form of the biologist. We have Control losing it. We have, what else we got? The lighthouse keeper going through hell, basically. We can see that, I'm pretty sure we're introduced to when the last time Gloria saw the lighthouse keeper as a child. Lots and lots of stuff, but we did read 70 pages, so let's get into it, shall we? Chapter 11, Ghostbird. What kind of life was this, where you could read a letter from your own haunted twin? That you could live within the memories of another and think of them as real second skin, and yet so utterly false. And that's something really interesting to contemplate, is that imagine yourself as a copy, and you discover a journal of yourself, and you get to, not only do you share the memories of this person, but also reading these things that you didn't get to experience, even though you are the same person. Granted, not exactly the same person because you guys diverged with your experiences, but you harbor all of these memories before all of that, and what does that context provide to reading this stuff? So it's really it's really something to ponder, and something I think that's one of the reasons why I highlighted this line. Is it's a great first line, but it's also, it gave me pause when I was reading this to just stop and think about that for a moment, and it's really difficult to wrap my head around. And honestly, that's what makes the best science fiction for me, or the books that make you think and just stop, right? Not want to just get to the end of the plot, but ponder what the author is posing. And let's just say there's a lot of commentary in this, or a lot of meaning beyond the plot. And I hope hopefully I'm covering it in enough detail for you. And if I missed anything, which is absolutely possible, let me know down in the comments. It was dusk now, almost nightfall, and into the silence and gathering shadows, Grace took the lead, said, "We're astronauts. All of the expedition members have been astronauts." Control's face had become a resolute mask that said he didn't want to deal with this. So Control is absolutely losing it. He wanted only to bury his nose in what was comfortable. He clutched the yellowing pages of the biologist's letter tight in his hand, while the biologist's journal, which Grace had rescued from the lighthouse, lay on his lap. So he's losing himself in the journals, because it's something he can focus on. He can control, I guess, right? He can control these things that are laying right before him versus all of the crazy stuff that's going on around him. "We're not on Earth," Ghostbird said. "We cannot be on Earth. Not with that much distortion of time, not with the things the biologist saw." And Grace finally said, "That was my conclusion. One of the theories put forward by the science division." "A kind of wormhole," Control said. "Everything in Area X that we thought was degrading too rapidly, most of it was just getting old." So I don't know how I completely forgot about this, but the time warp, the wormhole, whatever you want it to be, but we know that a lot of the equipment was degrading in a very perceived short amount of time, but we know now that that just wasn't the case, and this is such a big part of the entire story. I don't know why I forgot it, but there is more to come. So much more time had passed in Area X after the border came down before the first expedition had gone in. "How was this not known before?" Control said. "How was this not clear before?" "Corrupted data," Grace said. "Skewed samples, incomplete information." Ghostbird said. "So many expeditions came back disoriented, damaged, or not at all, that the SR had no reliable samples." "She's right," Grace said. "We never had anyone who lived long enough in Area X or saw so clearly that managed to write down their observations." "The critical question," Grace said, "is what is the purpose of this organism or organisms?" This is kind of the answer to the big question that a lot of people have had, is how do people not know what the hell's going on? She's laying it all down right here. Never had enough, no one ever lived long enough. We did not have enough information. Everybody came back completely disoriented with their memory loss. So we get into a little bit more of that later on. But if you as a reader didn't grasp it beforehand, Vandermeer is giving it to us now. "People make patterns all the time without realizing it," Ghostbird said. "An organism can have a purpose and yet also make patterns that have little to do with that purpose." Control wasn't prepared to receive this knowledge. It was eating him from the inside out. Indeed, right? I mean, it's an existential crisis, to say the least. But we as humans always want to know how things work. We must figure them out. We must control them. We must be able to predict what they're going to do, or at least explain what they did in the past. And Area X is an anomaly that we just can't explain. Potentially impossible for us to explain in our current state. Membranes and dimensions, limitless amounts of space, limitless amounts of energy, effortless manipulation of molecules, continual attempts to transform the human into the non-human, the ability to move an entire biosphere to another place. This is one thing that I don't know if they ever truly know, but for some reason, I like the idea that Area X exists where it does on Earth, that it doesn't like transport you to some parallel dimension. I know these are all hypotheses, but it seems to be where things are leading because of the time jumps, but it could completely be something else entirely. From the window, the low buildings were revealed as facades, bruised and ruined cinder block houses with the roofs gone, vines bursting out. And among that unintended terrarium, great word, a row of little crosses stuck in the soil, fresh enough to have been bodies buried by Grace. Time warps, something else? Behind her, Grace and Control talked. It was a circular discussion, a loop that Control was creating to trap himself inside of. So out of all three of these people, Control is having the most difficult time, which makes sense. What it always led to in human beings, a decision about what to do. Exactly. What are we going to do? Where do we go from here? As if purpose could solve everything. And I was just talking about that, how we need to know there must be a purpose. There must be a motive behind something. And that is our drive. That is what we aspire to find out. You could know the what of something forever and never discover the why. Couldn't have said it better myself, Vandermeer. Control had started to return to safe ground of subjects, like the lighthouse keeper, like Central. Central kept the island of secrets all this time. Central buried it, buried the island, just kept sending expeditions out here to this fucking ugly place, this place that isn't really even what it's supposed to be, this fucking place that just keeps killing people and doesn't fucking even give you the chance to fight back. He's losing it. So after a time, Ghostbird stopped him and she placed her arms around Control's and held him like a child, like a little baby child who needs to be comforted, right? He thrashed in Ghostbird's arms, resisting though. Where's the biologist now? Ghostbird asked. Not important, Control said. The least thing now. A fly or a bird or something or nothing. Dead? Yeah, she's definitely alive. And where is she? Somewhere out there. The biologist is coming here. Coming back to where the owl had once roosted, coming down to the place where her doppelganger now stood. That sound louder now. The snapping of tree branches, of tree trunks. Holy crap, this is where she is. Her final form. The biologist was coming down the hillside in all her glory and monstrosity. Ghostbird saw it from the landing window, how the biologist coalesced out of the night, her body flickering and stitching its way into existence. Stitching? He's used that word quite a bit. In the midst of a shimmering wave that imposed itself on the reality of the forested hillside, the vast bulk seething down the hill through the forest, the smell that presaged the biologist, thick brine and oil and some sharp crushed herb, the sound that it made, as if the wind and sea had been smashed together. He has such a great way. I've noticed this with certain authors. I'm reading another book right now where I'm just absolutely blown away by the language that these people use. The simple language, though, that they put together to really describe something so perfectly. Vandermeer, of course, is very knowledgeable, proficient in linguistics surrounding nature, and here he does it again. The hillside come alive and sliding down the ruined lighthouse at a steady pace like a lava flow. It bore down on the lighthouse. Ghostbird just stood at the window waiting for it while Grace and Control screamed at her to come away. She stood there like the captain of a ship facing a monumental storm. Yes, this is very, very crazy. It had many, many glowing eyes that were also like flowers or sea anemones spread open, the blossoming of many eyes. Her eyes, Ghostbird's eyes. So this is like seeing God for Ghostbird almost, right? Because she's part of her, but it's this like otherworldly amalgam of stuff. Ghostbird leaned out the window, reached out and pushed through the shimmering layer. So she's like merging with it almost. And her hands found purchase on that slick, thick skin among all of those eyes, her eyes staring up at her, looking back at herself. She saw that the biologist now existed across locations and landscapes, those other horizons gathering in a blurred and rising wave. Cosmic horror defined everybody. There was a connection. There was recognition. Nothing monstrous existed here, only beauty, only the glory of good design, of intricate planning. And this is a theme that Jeff Vandermeer has been playing a lot with here. is that we have this perceived area, Area X, and the creatures within or therein that are just horrific or evil. It's doing terrible things. And I think I touched on this in another video, but it's beauty. It's beautiful, right? It's starting over. It's creating anew. It's destroying all of the terrible things and creating a kind of perfection in a way. Now, it's alien to us, so we think it's a horror, but from a different perspective, it might be the best thing to ever happen to us, to the world, something bigger than us, right? A very religious experience, of course. That could transition not from the land of water, but from one remote place to another with no need for a door and a border. So, what did this remind me of? I could be wrong, but with all this portal jumping, this sea hopping, this time dilation, whatever you want to call it, it had to have been the biologist. Remember way back in Annihilation, when the biologist and the psychologist were at the other lighthouse, and they saw signs of a battle, right? There was like fortifications on the beach, as if, I can't remember the quote, but as if they were fighting off some giant Leviathan. You know, I know he likes to use Leviathan coming from the sea, but what could that be? I think this is it. I think it's the biologist going through these time warps, because again, we know that the order of things doesn't matter. The chronology of these expeditions doesn't really matter. In the sense of where the biologist relates to it, because it appears as if she or it now can just go wherever she wants. Crazy, crazy stuff. Which brings us to chapter 12, The Lighthouse Keeper. 1,000 lighthouses burned to columns of ash along the coastline of an endless island. 1,000 blackened candles trailing white smoke from atop the broad, broken head of a monster rising from the sea. 1,000 dark cormorants, wings awash in crimson flames, taking flight from the waves, eyes reflecting the wrath of their own extinction. Who maketh his angels spirits, his ministers a flaming fire? Saul woke coughing in the darkness. Dull but intense, somehow like a sickened skin on the inside. More beautiful descriptions of what's going on with him. But Charlie wasn't there, wouldn't be back from his night gig for another week at the earliest. Unable to tell him the truth, that he still didn't feel right. Not a sickness in the normal way. Not what the doctor had diagnosed, but something hiding inside, waiting for its moment. Someone was in his lighthouse, more than one person though, whispering, or maybe even shouting. The whispering, the mumbling continued in a matter-of-fact way without emotion, and this convinced him to investigate. And he takes up the axe in the wall, just like Jack Torrance in The Shining. When he banged on the lantern room, it was to the side of the blue-black sky filled with stars, and to three figures, two standing, one bent over in front of the extinguished lens. Suzanne and a woman he didn't know stood by the door to the railing dressed in all black, with Henry on his knees in front of them. Some crazy ritual. What the hell are you doing here? Why don't you go to sleep, Saul? Why don't you go back to bed and let us finish up? We won't be long now. Finish up with what? Something had happened here, right before Saul had burst in. The hell I will. You're trespassing. You broke in. You turned off the light. And who is this? Go back to sleep. An urgency there. A whispered quality to the words, almost as if Henry was pleading with him. No, Saul, Suzanne said. You really don't look well. You're sick and need to rest. Take a deep breath and relax and turn around and go back to sleep. Go to sleep. What does this sound like? This sounds like hypnosis, doesn't it? We're very familiar with hypnosis with the Southern Reach. A sense of drifting, of sleepiness began to overtake Saul, and he buried the axe head in the floorboards. Ka-thunk. Get out, now, all of you. We're studying something unique, Saul, Henry said finally. Just get the hell out. While still in his head, 1,000 lighthouses burned. He's changing. You're done here. I'm calling the police if I ever see you here again. But it's going to be a beautiful morning, Suzanne said. The woman gave him a mysterious smile as she turned into the spiral landing below, a smile full of teeth. Then they disappeared down the steps, the woman being the strange woman. When he was sure they weren't coming back, Saul leaned over to switch on the lens. The only illumination now besides the moon and the stars came from the faint red dot still pulsing from the island. Back at the front door, though, a shadow waited for him. Henry. Don't worry, it's just me, Henry said. The other two are gone. Will you never just leave, Henry? Will you continue to be such a burden? Burden? I'm kind of a gift, Saul, because I understand. I know what's going on. Saul, I made the hole in the lens while Suzanne was away. I'm the one. I did it because I knew something must be in there, because there was this one spot where none of my equipment registered anything. You don't need to say anything, but you know the truth, and I'll track it down too. I'll find it. Suzanne thinks the catalyst was something they brought with them. But that's not true. And yet, it happened. And then Henry smiled and walked away. Toward what destination, Saul had no idea. Such a weird encounter, right? I mean, What is, and yet it happened. We know what it is, but who are they, right? Who is them? Which brings us to chapter 13, crazy control. Half the wall exploded and 1,000 eyes peered in as Control sprawled from the impact of the dust and debris. He was playing dead to keep his head. I love this because right here it says it's a line from a book about monsters his father had read to him as a child. His father's carving, though, falling out of his pocket, symbolizing he's losing even more control, his last grasp on his family. There came a sound like a weight leaving the sky, a plunging toward the waves, and the awful weight of a pushing against the air lessened, and the restless agony in his bones receded, and he was just a dirty, spent figure weeping on the floor of a ruined lighthouse. He is hitting rock bottom. He was back in control, but control was meaningless. His father's sculptures in his old backyard were tipping over, one after the other. The chess moves between them in those last days before his father had died. The pressure of the piece between his fingers as he moved, and the empty air as he let go. Such a beautiful description of him not just gaining control. Control is meaningless. Losing control, everything he knows, every thread that really constitutes who control is and what he is falling. It's slipping between his fingers. Silence then, an absence into which the brightness again took up sentinel duty, swung around the ever-greater confidence to peer at him like the leviathans from his dreams, perhaps unaware of what it protected, what it lived within, except he would never forget now. And later, much later, Grace, extending a hand. Can you walk? Yes, I can walk. He would be safe there. He wouldn't be safe there. Control lay there back at the landing, sprawled across the blanket, looking up at the paint-peeled ceiling modeled by candlelight. And this is when he is reading the pages from Whitby. Area X has been created by an organism left behind by a civilization so advanced and so ancient and so alien to us and our own intent and our own thought processes that it has long since left us behind, left everything behind. Hello, John, said some version of Lowry in his head. Surprise. Ghostbird had her back to Control, staring out at the night. Was she charting Original's progress? What did it share with you? Control asked. What did it take? Nothing. Nothing at all. The biologist took out the convoy, Ghostbird said. Yes, she did, Grace admitted. But I have been careful and quiet and not provoked her. Sometimes there's a kind of foreshadowing in the air. Sometimes she will make landfall where she found the owl, then push on through the interior, headed here, as if she remembers. Most times I can avoid her. Most times she isn't here. Pretty crazy how it makes you wonder, like, how much of the biologist is still within this creature. It's such a cool parallel to think that, Ghostbird has the memories of the biologist, even though she's a copy of the biologist, and now the biologist is some other creature that may or may not have the memories. It seems like she potentially does, but she's completely turned into something else with a purpose we don't know, other than being just trapped in this terrible cycle of going back and maybe trying to find her husband. And it might be this struggle between her wants as a person that she used to be and whatever the desire is of this creature she has become, if there are any at all. I just know your presence here attracted her, made her curious. We could be just like the biologist, Control said. Stay here, wait it out, wait her out. Just give in, goading them. So he's ready to give into the brightness. He's tired. He's frustrated. He doesn't want to keep looking. He's an alien here, pretty much. I mean, Grace is too, but yeah, he's ready to let go. And then he returns with Whitby's pages read by candlelight. We must trust our thoughts while we sleep. We must trust our hunches. We must begin to examine all of those things that we think of as irrational simply because we do not understand them. In other words, we must distrust the rational, the logical, the sane, in an attempt to reach for something higher, for something more worthy. Brilliance and bullshit both, indeed. It sounds like woo-woo, right? It sounds kind of like religious talk in a way, where, but I think philosophically it's kind of a cool thought experiment. It's to, it's kind of a mind trick to make you look at things that you might dismiss otherwise because they are illogical, but maybe if you give them a second look, you'll discover something, or maybe you'll just fool yourself and discover something, which in this crazy place that's Area X, that's probably what you're going to find. What you call the crawler. We have to try. We have to go back down into the tower and find some way to neutralize it. Control, Ghostbird said. There's no reset. There's never going to be a reset. That's a suicide mission. Well, we already know he wants to give in. He wants to end it. But the director thought you could change its direction, he said. That you could change it if you tried hard enough. I don't know, though. Is that really what the director is saying? Or is she saying that she just wants to reconnect with Saul? Again, I know I talked about this on the Discord server, but That's my favorite thing about this entire story, is that all this craziness comes down to an old lighthouse keeper and his relationship with this young, rambunctious girl who hung out on the island, right? He just happened to touch this strange little flower and everything changed. And the entire motivation of the psychologist or the ex-director is that she wants to reconnect with Saul somehow. It's true we have one thing no one else had, Grace said. You. The only photocopy of the director's last plan. So I don't think we are privy to the director's technical last plan, but let us read on. Which brings us to chapter 14, the director. When eventually you return to the Southern Reach, you find a gift waiting for you. A framed black and white photograph of the lighthouse keeper, his assistant, and a little girl playing on the rocks, head down, jacket hood disguising her features. You. And it is left by Lowry. Love and kisses, signed Jimmy Boy. Pull everything we have on Jackie Severance, you tell Grace. Jack Severance. And the son, John Rodriguez. That connects Severance, any Severance, to Lowry. We continue to bring John Rodriguez, or Control's mother, back into this thing, and Grandpa Jack even, right? Pretty crazy. Meanwhile, you have a plant and a cell phone. A cell phone, well, we'll get into it, but there's a really interesting concept in this chapter. Try to pretend everything is normal. Is Whitby broken? His smile flickers back into place at times. So she's constantly wondering, is this the copy or the real one? Don't forget about me, he said so long ago, and you won't ever forget him, but you might have to leave him behind. What does that mean, leave him behind? I guess this is before she finally goes back a final time, but this line reminds us that her entire point is to reconnect with the lighthouse keeper and find out what happened, I guess, or have some sense of closure. The plant will not die. No parasites will touch the plant. The plant will not die. No extremes of temperatures will affect it. Freeze it. It will thaw, burn it. It will regenerate. The plant will not die. This crazy plant they brought back, as well as a cell phone. I don't think we're looking at a plant, Whitby says, tentative at one status meeting. Why are we seeing a plant, Whitby? Chaney managing to convey the all-consuming exasperation. Why are we seeing a plant that looks like a plant being a plant? Just think of all the fucking things we have to reevaluate if you're right, Whitby, starting with you. Later, Whitby will regale you with information on how quantum mechanics impacts photosynthesis, how plants talk to one another, et cetera, et cetera. So he goes on and talks about all of the craziness that we perhaps discount when it comes to plants. So we view them as a lesser species than us. But he's talking about how there's things much deeper that we don't really know or don't pay attention to. I read this great book called The Entangled Life about fungi, and it blew my mind. All the crazy stuff that they do with their mycelium, that these crazy connective networks, how people are trying to harness the mycelium for computational power. It's bonkers. I need to read it again. Highly recommend it if you haven't checked it out. But you're less obsessed with the cell phone. But the text can't make it work. It should work. It just doesn't. As if it's not really made of the parts it should be made of, but it looks exactly that way, like a normal phone. Really odd, though. So it's very reminiscent of... So this is the first time we've had a non-biological thing be composed of something that it should be composed of, or it should be... It looks like it... I know I can't articulate myself right now, but maybe, I guess, biologically, it's not what it is. Very similar to when the biologist was taking samples of, flesh and other materials like wood and stuff in Area X, and it was all human samples, right? You offer it to Lowry during one of your calls as a kind of sacrifice of a pawn, but he doesn't want it, insists you keep it. Recalling the very earliest photographs and video of Lowry and the others, Lowry returned disoriented, babbling on videotape words he would later recant about how nothing would ever come out of the passage in the border. Nothing. Because they were waiting for ghosts, for something long dead, Area X, a memorial, a gravestone. Eventually, into the middle of all this comes the call you've been dreading, Lowry. Another 11 expedition is a go. That's too soon. Maybe it's time for you to stop being a fucking coward, Lowry says. 3 months. Get ready, Cynthia. They implant into the brain of the psychologist what Lowry calls a pearl of surveillance and recall. What the hell does that mean? 12 months later, the last 11th expedition comes back, acting almost like zombies. 18 months later, of course, they're all dead from cancer. Morale at the Southern Reach becomes worse after the last 11th return. So this is talking about how the Southern Reach was, appears to be a competent organization at one point, but they're losing morale. The employees, I guess, are dwindling. They don't care anymore. That's why once Control makes it there, it's a complete mess. Jackie Severance visits regularly afterward as if maybe Central is concerned about something. A riddle wrapped in a puzzle, Grace says. Do you know what her father, Jack Severance, is up to? No, what? Everything. Does it ever get to you? Severance asks you more than once? No. You lie. Shoot back your own cliche. We all have our jobs to do. Back when she worked for the Southern Reach, you liked her. There must be things you would have done differently, Severance says. Maybe. At some point after the last of the 11th passes away, you get black paint from maintenance. So this is when she is decorating the door. She is writing all of the scripture on it by the lighthouse keeper. She draws a map too of all the landmarks in Area X. Lowry, drunk out of his mind at his going away party. How goddamn boring. Fucking boring if we got to live in that world. So Lowry, it's a competition. He wants to destroy this thing. He wants to win, quote unquote, right? So it's cool to have these different perspectives throughout, especially from a guy who came from there. He's been there. He's come back. I really hope in Absolution, I think we do anyway, we get a first-hand account of what happened to him and what turned him into this ranting lunatic. And Grace, I'm still here because of my family, and because of the director, and because I don't want to give up on them or you. You say to Grace, after I'm done here, I'm going to order the bodies of the last 11th exhumed. What is she going to do? I'm excited to find out. I'm going to finish this up, you tell her, because I started it. So let me help, she says. I started it, so, I mean, I'm guessing that she's assuming blame for this, even though really she had nothing to do with it, right? She left because she didn't have this bit of closure, perhaps? I have no idea. You have a plan, right? This is all part of the plan. I'm relying on you to have a plan. The irony, right? A plan. Nobody has a freaking plan. All I have is a feeling, an intuition, and a brief conversation with a man who should be dead. I have a plant and a phone. In your dreams, you stand on the sidelines, watching a war between Central and Area X. In some fundamental way, you feel they have been in conflict far longer than 30 years. Central, the ultimate void to counteract Area X, impersonal, antiseptic, labyrinthine, and unknowable. What is that a metaphor for, kids? I don't know. Just us and salvation, us and progress? I'm not quite sure, but I think Jeff Vandermeer is definitely saying something there. Which brings us to 15, the Lighthouse Keeper. Now, this is when Saul I highlighted a lot because it's good stuff. It's when he's really struggling with the brightness, perhaps. He's changing into something else, the crawler. There came an incandescent light. There came a star in motion, the sun plummeting to the earth. There fell from the heavens a huge burning torch, thick flames dripping out behind it. And this light, this star, shook the sky on the beach where he had walked a second ago under a clear blue sky. The scorched intensity of the sudden object hurtling down toward him battered his senses, sent him sprawling to his knees as he tried to run, and then dove face first into the sand. He screamed as the sparks sprayed out all around, and the core of the light hit somewhere in front of him. His teeth smashed in his mouth, his bones turned to powder. The impact conjured up an enormous tidal wave like a living creature. Right? We've seen this. The biologist is almost a tidal wave of a living creature. When it fell upon him, the weight, the immensity destroyed him one more time and it washed away anything he could have recognized. Saul managed to get to his feet, to stagger a step or two, and as he did, he realized that everything around him had been restored. He's back to reality. From the center of the light that had come storming down, an image had appeared, a pattern that he recognized. The 8 leaves of the strange plant, each one like another spiraling step down into oblivion. What he is going to turn into. So let me ask you, what is the significance of 8? Maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't. It was a relief to sit there trying to recover, peering into the tidal pool. I love this because he's looking at the tidal pool as a gateway to this other alien-like dimension. And in a way it is. If you guys have ever looked in tidal pools, it's, a little microcosm. There had been other visions, but none as powerful as this one. He had a perverse urge for Henry to appear, to confess all the symptoms. But Saul hadn't seen Henry or Suzanne since the incident in that night, nor the strange woman. The tidal pool became a kind of living cabinet of curiosities. If he stared long enough into the conforming oblivion, that microcosm, it washed away everything else, even the shadow of his reflection. It was there some minutes later that Gloria found him. So he's being almost hypnotized by this alien-like portal, you might say. Maybe it's a portal, right? For a long way, they just sat together watching, not literally. He had decided he could not talk to her about what he had seen. Finally, Gloria said, "Why are you down here and not working by the shed or on the tower?" "I don't feel like working today." Images from old illuminated manuscripts of comets hurtling through the sky, from the books in his father's house, the reverberation and recoil of the beach exploding under his feet, the strange creatures in the sand. What message should he take from that? "Yeah, I don't always want to go to school," she said, "but at least you get money." I do get money. That's true. They should give me money. I have to put up with a lot. School's important, he said, because he felt like he should say it. I told my mom this is a school too, but that didn't work. What's this? The tidal pools, the forest, the trails, all of it. Are you still feeling different? What? No, I'm fine, Gloria. There are things the lighthouse teaches me, though, Gloria said. To stand up straight and tall and project light out of your head toward the sea? She giggled at that. No, here's what the lighthouse teaches me. Be quiet and let me tell you. The lighthouse teaches me to work hard, to keep my room clean, to be honest, and to be nice to people. My room is a mess and I lie sometimes, and I'm not always nice to people, but that's the idea. I love that there's this unspoken connection between these two. There's really no realization that either of them have had. It's just that she continually comes over here and Saul, continually puts up with her. But he, of course, enjoys her company. You like being a lighthouse keeper, don't you, Saul? Why, you want my job when you grow up? No, I never want to be a lighthouse keeper, shoveling and making tomatoes and climbing all the time. At least you're honest. Yep, Mom says I should be less honest. But I gotta go. Mom's going to come by in the car soon. We're driving into town to meet my dad. A shadow had passed over the tidal pool again, and all he could see were their two faces peering down. He could have passed for her father, couldn't he? Or was he too old? But such thoughts were a form of weakness. What does that mean? So interesting observation from Saul, right? Is he reminiscing about, what could have been? He could have been a dad, but then also ascribing it to these thoughts being weak, thinking about something that is unattainable. It's longer this time, she said. Mom wants me up there for a couple of months at least. He looked over at her, saw the serious expression on her face. 2 months. That was an impossibly long time. Goodbye, Saul. Save this tidal pool for me. I'll put up a sign. He tried to smile. On impulse, he turned and shouted, Hey, Gloria, don't forget about me. Take care of yourself. Bittersweet, bittersweet. Now we know the exact time she heard him speak that. Which brings us to chapter 16, Ghost Bird. The lighthouse rose from fog and reflections like a mirror of itself, the beach gray and cold, the sand rasping against the hull of the boat as they abandoned it in the shallows. The waves came in small and half curling like the froth of malformed questions. So that is the second time he has used that descriptor. The first time was with the some kind of fern, some kind of plant, when I think it was Control was visiting the border the first time. He saw these little curling fronds of ferns as malformed questions. But I love this parallel. It's this lighthouse rising from the fog like reflections in a mirror itself. Burned by the border commander, Grace had told him. Burned because they didn't understand it, and the journals with it. The origin of the orange flags, the doing of the border commander, a cataloging of all that was unknowable to her. So it's these people. They're trying to make sense of things in any way they possibly can, but it's completely futile. And luckily, the biologist had not reappeared. The oceans through which the biologist now traveled were wider and deeper than the ones that led them to the lighthouse. Cosmic horror, everybody. They trudged up the beach toward the lighthouse, the ever-present thistles. We remember that, right? I think it was, I think the biologist was the one that mentioned the thistles, or maybe your husband pressed one in his journal. I can't remember. Ghostbird could see the brightness flaring out from him like a halo of jagged knives. Man, poor Control. She's even seeing it now. I guess she's part of this whole thing, so it makes sense. No point in going up, Grace said. Not even a bit curious? Do you like walking through a charnel house at cemeteries too? Gallows humor. I don't want to go up, Control said. I don't. Well, let me add to the collection, Grace said, and tossed the biologist's island account and her journal through the open front door. Wow, crazy. Never has a setting been so able to live without the souls traversing it. A sentence Ghostbird remembered from a college text, one that had lingered with the biologist after her transition to the city, come back to her as she stood by the empty lot. The text had been referring to urban landscapes, which is funny because Vandermeer's been pushing another book about urban landscapes by another author, of course. It's kind of like it's a nonfiction book, and it's like a photo book, but with a lot of essays. But the biologist had interpreted as applying to the natural world. The only solution to the environment is neglect, which requires our collapse. Right there. That's Jeff Vandermeer's environmentalism in the flesh, a sentence the biologist had excised from her thesis. You can see how Vandermeer is all of these characters in one way or another, right? She was content with silence, but Grace and Control were less so. I miss hot showers, Control said. I miss not itching all over. I miss standing on the roof of the Southern Reach and looking out over the forest, Grace said. The director and me, we would stand up there and make our plans. That catch in Grace's throat, that invisible connection, Ghostbird contemplated it. What did she miss? Well, they had a little bit of a love connection, I think. Perhaps so many journals had piled up in the lighthouse because on some level, most came in time to recognize the futility of language. not just in Area X, but against the rightness of the lived-in moment, the instant of touch, of connection, for which words were such a sorrowful disappointment, so inadequate an expression of both the finite and the infinite, even as the crawler wrote out its terrible message. Funny thing for a writer to say, huh? That language itself just becomes futile at some point, right? Where we evolve beyond it, or Area X transforms us beyond it anyway. Back on the island, there had been a last unanswerable question. If they now traversed a landscape transplanted from somewhere far remote, then what existed within the coordinates of the real Area X back on Earth? I was hoping that it was always there, but it appears it's not. At least they don't think so. We are, Control had replied. We are. That's where we are, because he wants to ground himself in some kind of reality. If you go through the door, you come to Area X, Gray said. If you walk across the border, you go to the other place, whatever it is. But Ghostbird knew what she had seen in the corridor leading into Area X, the detritus and trash she had seen there, the bodies, and wondered if it might be real and not summoned from her mind. Ahead of them now came the smell of burning, and from above, something the others could not see stitched its way, there's that word again, stitched, its way through the overcast sky, and Ghostbird was not surprised. This is that other something, the first thing that she and Control saw earlier on, which brings us to Chapter 17, The Director. One spring day at the Southern Reach, you're taking a break, pacing across the courtyard tiles as you worry at a problem in your head, and you see something strange out by the swamp lake. At the edge of the black water, a figure squats, hunching over, hands you cannot see, busy at some mysterious task. It's Whitby, playing in the mud, washing something, strangling something. He turns long enough to acknowledge you and go back to what he's doing. The trees are as sullen as ever, looking like hunched-over priests with long beards of moss, or as Gray says, less respectfully, like a line of used-up old drug addicts. So with those lines, I always talk about POV and perspective with characters, and this is such a great example because there's very different perceptions of these things, right? We have hunched-over priests, and there's been lots and lots of references to cathedrals and religious iconography and stuff like that, spirituality in this book, whereas Grace views these things like a line of used-up old drug dealers. Whitby is watching a small brown mouse. We know about the mouse. Whitby has draped a little white towel across his left forearm. It is monogrammed with a large cursive W in gold thread. I love that. I love that Whitby has a monogrammed towel. Whitby's hand is so pale and small that there's a sort of symmetry on display, an absurd yet somehow touching suggestion of a shared ancestry. That's so funny to imagine Whitby, I don't know, Whitby and the mouse's flesh being very similar. It's very telling, not only of what Whitby looks like, but how the psychologist perceives him. It has been 4 months since the last member of the last expedition died of cancer, 6 weeks since you had them exhumed. It has been more than 2 years since you came back across the border with Whitby. You have had a sense of Whitby recovering. What do you have there, Whitby? A mouse? Where did you find her? Him, in the attic. I found him in the attic. Oh, at home? In the attic. Why did you bring him out here? To wash him. You couldn't wash him inside? That water's contaminated. What's his name? He doesn't have a name. Well, he's a handsome mouse. Don't talk to me like I'm an idiot. I'm aware this looks strange, but think about some of the things you do for stress. Such a weird exchange, and we know where the attic is, right? Presumably that's where he was waiting and petting control said where his weird illustrations were, or his mural was on the wall. The plant bloomed, Whitby says. There's no emergency. It's already over. It happened in the middle of the night, last night. Everyone else had left. I work very late sometimes, and I like to spend time in the storage cathedral. And there was a flower. The plant was blooming, but it's gone now. It all happened very fast. What did the blossom look like? Like an ordinary flower with 7 or 8 petals. 8 petals! There's the significance of 8. Translucent, almost white. What did you do then? I scheduled a purification, just to be sure, and I left. Give me a more extensive report on the plant, for my eyes only. And you cannot keep sneaking a mouse into the building, Whitby. For one thing, security will catch you eventually. Take it home. I'll keep it in the attic, Whitby says. Do that. Back inside, you visit the storage cathedral. You find the plant, which is a false tag that designates it as belonging to the first 8th expedition. Okay, I don't know why I didn't see this before, but now we have lots of 8s. We have the first 8-petaled flower that Saul saw in his mind, which I think, if I remember correctly, is the one he touched. We have this flower that has 8 petals, and then also it's part of the 8th expedition. Sensing a pattern. You examine the plant, the area around it, the floor, searching for any evidence of a dried up flower. You look at those test results in your office and you wonder if the plant had only blossomed into Whitby's mind, and if so, what that meant. I love that. Blossomed in his mind. That takes it all the way back to the lighthouse keeper. Put the immortal plant under around-the-clock surveillance. When we zoom away to another situation where she's playing pool, the realtor and the veteran of an expedition to the Star Lanes a week later, you're listening to the realtor describe some couple that had been squatting in a model home. They thought that so long as I didn't know their names, I couldn't call the police. Waiting there back at your desk at the Southern Reach, you already have the files of candidates for a 12th expedition. Right on top is the most promising to your mind, an antisocial biologist whose husband went on the last 11th. I love the timelines. I love the timelines intersecting. I love the theme with the crazy time warps in Area X, plus just all of the overlapping stuff that we're dealing with right now. This is such a great conclusion. It's kind of a non-linear conclusion, which you don't really see often. I also noticed that there's a lot of people out there who find this book their least favorite. So far, I would say it's my most favorite. I'd probably say it's my second most favorite so far. But my only guess as to why they don't like it is probably the conclusion, which I don't completely remember. But let us move on. What are we going to read next time, everybody? Why don't we read through chapter 23, which will take us to page 303. And then after that, we're finishing the book because there's only about 40 more pages. So 2 more videos to come until we complete this entire trilogy, everybody. Don't forget, let me know how you're feeling. Join the Discord if you're not already there. And thank you so much for reading along with me in this very long series. Thanks for hanging out. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.